Met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early '74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. As practically a deathbed speech, he educated me about those concepts and who the players were in this game. When Wernher von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. It's a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie.
Is it the truth you want? Be careful what you ask for.
Clearly a balloon, right?
Oh, I think swamp gas. I'm gonna go with swamp gas.
Okay, yeah, I can see it. It's a lens refractulation. A lens refractulation.
Refractulation.
That's what.
I like it.
That's what's going on here, folks. That is the McWest explanation. It's parallaxidiculous, huh?
Say what? Oh man, that's weird though, because like, remember we were looking at it, and I was like, "Yo, what is that weird shadow in the background?" But
Yes.
I don't even know, like how the fuck that would work for it to have been a flare, or what the hell the purpose would be attaching that to parachute in the first place, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Oh, you mean the star one that we saw day before yesterday?
Yep. Where
Yes.
I still don't take his excuse for it 100%, only because like I don't know what the fuck they would. Like if it were an enemy seeing that, they would probably know that it was a fucking flare attached to a parachute.
But you can see. I was curious about that outline, and the shape that it takes. It does look pretty consistent with some kind of parachute. So I don't know. I could, like I said, I'm not an expert, man. I just got to use my best judgment and listen to the explanations and try to keep an open mind about it. Now, I can tell you that this thing that was flying over your house, definitely not a fucking balloon.
Yeah, fucking weird. That thing's
Yeah.
fucking weird. God damn, what the fuck is that, man? I'm still weirded out by that because it sounded like an extremely loud fucking thing that we know as a helicopter. It did not look like a fucking helicopter, though.
No, not at all.
I mean, you heard it through the thing. It sounded like a fucking helicopter, right?
It did. I was thinking like some kind of big drone. And perhaps maybe it is, but wow. I mean, if you look at that, the shape and, again, this is enhanced. We had to enhance it through AI to get this clear of a picture, but it's pretty amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching the Gabriel Speaks podcast. We are chilling with Flak Magnet. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, hit that little like and subscribe. That really helps us to spread the word and spread these podcasts. And hopefully people are getting good stuff out of these. Flak and I have done a lot of work previously on the Epstein files, and that work continues on, and other weird shit that comes up. And the Department of War, I almost called it Department of Defense, Department of War, just a couple days ago, dropped a plethora of files, images, videos for us to sort through and try to make sense of. Let me ask you, Flak, how far have you gotten into looking through this stuff?
I've still been peeling through as much as I can. I've also been now going back in time, trying to find incidents in areas where, because we get a lot of anecdotes. There's a lot of reports in there. So I'm trying to line things up and see what we can correlate to being the same thing, or at least very similar, around the same time, maybe same tech used. Yeah.
Now, Pure Democracy wants to know if this is the new materials released by the U.S. government. This image you're looking at here is not. This image you're looking at here flew over Flak Magnet's head during one of our live streams. And he was lucky enough to smart enough to think to grab the camera and snap a picture of it. And that is what we were left with.
Oh, yeah. And then another little anecdote. So I did see an Amazon drone in a video like maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And then, now this is before I knew what their platform for drones even looked like. It looked almost similar. Like I'll send you the video in the back channels. But remember, I was telling you it looked like one of those big Huey helicopters, the ones that'll hold the fucking tank if it needs to. Right. It looked like a smaller version of that, but still pretty fucking big. Minus the propellers. Like I couldn't see any fucking propellers on this thing. But that's kind of what the Amazon fucking drone looks like. Where I wonder if they were just sending it on routes or for whatever the fuck reason, maybe for telemetry data or something like that. But like, that's might be the closest thing, but it still was way too fucking loud. It didn't sound like a bunch of brushless motor fans or propellers, you know?
The whole thing was just so odd because if I remember correctly, we were discussing Lakatsky and the Epstein files. And then
Yup.
there's a drone or some kind of crazy thing flying over your head. So super weird. So of all the files, like you said, we're peeling through these things. A lot of it is stuff that if you've researched this topic has been out there already. I think the big deal here is that there's this entire group of folks that unless, for whatever reason, unless the government says, yes, this is official and we're looking into this, it's bullshit. So I think what these files release, what they did is to all those people that need daddy government to say, oh, it's real. It gave them that permission to look into this stuff with maybe an open mind.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Like, because as many downfalls as this bit of disclosure has given us, what we do have, at least, is some people opening their eyes and their minds to this shit being real. And the other thing that we now have is a totally different group of people willing to give this shit a look over. You know, they still maybe skeptical, but at the very least, we now have the audience of the general public, hopefully. And that's what I'm kind of hoping on. Because even if you believe that the government is trying to give you anything, they showed their hand a little bit with this one, and I think that's at least a move in the positive direction. I also think it could be a bit of a psyop with the fact they gave us zero information on what they think it could be as of today. They just handed us a bunch of shit and said, figure it out yourself. So
yes. And you may have noticed I have been working this ongoing project, Ops or Aliens, and I do believe some of the subject matter falls into that series I'm putting together, because if you look at the timing of everything, it could certainly be a distraction. Gas is $6 a gallon. We're at war in the Middle East. Epstein files, everything else. You know, hey, okay, aliens, and hope everybody or most of the people are going to go chasing after that. So it could certainly be like a psyop.
yeah, absolutely. They're wonderful with psyops too. Like I feel like they're bread and butter for whatever future narrative they want to pull. You know.
Great, I was so scared. I love it. Love seeing you, buddy. And thank you everyone that's commenting and throwing in. You know, it does make a difference when our audience here throws ideas and questions out. I enjoy it anyway, getting that other perspective.
Well, plus having your ideas and your speculations fall on deaf ears is the absolute worst. So having anybody
True.
at least listening and giving it a thought over whether you agree with us or not is fucking awesome in my opinion. And thank you all for stopping by. You're written down in the good book as friends of mine, whether you like it or not. Now.
I agree, and we are keeping record. So, okay, so as we have literally over 17 pages that has been dumped, and for each one of those FBI files, for instance, the one we're going to talk about today, this is one file from one of the 17 pages, which is 94 pages long. And we're going to go through every line by line. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to take a look at kind of what the general idea or motivation or application was behind these different files. And we started this space off with some words from Carol Rosen. Carol Rosen was basically Werner von Braun's assistant. Also, she would translate for him for I think it was about 4 years. The last 4 years he was active. And she, as you saw there, was really stressing, which is the same thing we've heard Dr. Stephen Greer stress, which is they are going to use a fake alien invasion as an excuse to develop and use all of these aerospace type weapons. And then a lot of people, I haven't heard Rosen go on this too much, but Stephen Greer definitely continues on to say, ultimately, it's to kind of control us, right? Like essentially, we're going to be in camps. Worst case scenario, we're living under this tyrannical government that has all this power that we just can't compete with.
Yeah, I'm under that purview. Maybe not to the extent Stephen Greer goes, but it all is leading to something, and I'm not sure I like where it's going.
Yeah. Fair point, Pure Democracy. Yeah, Fair Democracy says, I mean, I also saw a UFO until I realized it was a bird reflecting the lights from below. So there's that. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's one thing I don't want to do on this show is promote fake bullshit, right? And it's not even really fake bullshit. It's just like the way something looks isn't always, it's our eyes and our brain interpreting the data of what we're seeing. So parallax is a thing. Refraction is a thing. My problem is when you have trained aviators that know what these things are, that know how to look out for these things, testify, and they get shot down by these, scientists that think they know everything, but if they were put in one of these jets, they'd puke their guts out. It's crazy that we're going to listen to some dude sitting in an office tell us that the guy that was flying the jet didn't see what he saw. Come on.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts to me. And then they're going to make him sign an NDA and
right
and get into further secrecy and shaming
Yes.
in order to make him feel like what he did see was fucking real and was weird. Like you'd think if they're doing the honest thing and being like, oh no, listen, this is what you saw, kid. Here is exactly what it is. By the way, don't worry about the NDA because you didn't see anything fucking secret or special or scary. But the opposite happens. It's shut your mouth. You didn't see what you saw. Sign this on NDA, and if you ever speak about it, we'll court-martial your ass.
Yeah, it's not great. And they do have, you can see as you're going through these files, this new way of reporting UAP. But every time you see it, I can't remember exactly what the form is called, but every time you see it, it's a very brief explanation. And it's just completely subjective, right? They don't add any of their own, what they think it could be onto it. It's just saw 3, unidentified blobs on my radar, confirmed visually at this altitude, then they left. And that's all you'll really read into it. But the fact that they do now have a way to get it on the record, I think, is a good step forward, right? It's not necessarily the best system, but it's a small step towards progress. At least we're not calling them fucking crazy for reporting what they saw.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there.
Now, this file we're looking at, this is the FBI file. You can see Carol Rosin's name up top along with John Cipher. And this is kind of what we're going to talk about today, because probably the most shocking thing in this, and it's, the name of the space is named after it, is that Carol Rosin believed and Cipher believed that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the best scientific explanation for what we're seeing in the skies. Neither Flak nor I feel 100% confident in presenting to you what the extraterrestrial hypothesis is, but who's smart as shit is Richard Dolan. And
I concur. I concur.
We're going to steal this bit of piece from UFO Hub. This is Richard Dolan explaining to us, hopefully quite simply, what the extraterrestrial hypothesis is. Let's check this out.
Well, I've been looking into UFOs for such a long time now, and I'm always asking myself new questions about this field. Just lately, I've been looking at revisiting the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And for anyone who's followed this subject, they realize that the ETH, as it's often called, is probably the most widely discussed possibility. When we think of UFOs, we think of extraterrestrials frequently. And I would say actually not for bad reasons. But thinking over the long history of this idea, it's obvious that there are many, many other competing theories as to what really the UFO response, the UFO phenomenon is. So I'll be talking about this. I've done this in a couple of lectures lately, and I'll be discussing it tomorrow at this particular conference.
$49.95 tickets on sale.
Basically, I think, for most of the 20th century, we were predisposed to think about extraterrestrials. Let me put it this way. Go back into like our science fiction of the 19th and 20th century, like H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, or even like the Buck Rogers comic strips of the 1930s and 40s. Human beings, what was our great frontier at that time? It was flight. We had just learned to fly in 1903. So the sky was our frontier, and then beyond that, space. So I think humans, we were predisposed to be thinking of flight as our latest frontier. And then in the 1940s, we become aware of this phenomenon we called flying saucers at the time. And so I don't think it was a stretch for people to wonder, flying saucers, well, we have airplanes, but this seems like the step beyond. So this is probably our means of space travel. And sure enough, not only in the public imagination, but within the military itself, and we know this for sure, a lot of speculation in the 1940s and 50s did center on what analysts called interplanetary craft. And this was a phrase that they used, interplanetary. And what we found, though, is that as the 1960s and 1970s came along, there were people looking at the UFO phenomenon thinking, seems a little bit too strange for it simply to be something as simple as extraterrestrial visitors. There are researchers like Jacques Vallée and John Keel, in particular, who talked about other very highly strange aspects of this phenomenon. I mean, Vallée was talking about how it really did appear that what we now see as UFOs, that ancient people talked about in other terms, like fairies of olden times. And then you have people who...
That's super interesting to me. And I think like as much shit as what is that one on History Channel, Ancient Aliens gets, I think people watch it, and I think it's been going for 100 seasons because it is an interesting hypothesis, right? That they have some species, or maybe even multiple species, have been interacting with this planet for centuries. Vallée got into like the possible multiple dimension stuff. And I know we've discussed that here as well. One of the things that I kind of theorize might be going on, at least a part of it, is future humans, like basically jumping through time, doing God knows what. But it is a fascinating idea to think about, because if you think about like it's a species or an intelligence that can travel the distances that would need to be traveled in space, to get from point A to point B and have it not take 2,000 light years. That kind of technology could probably be used to skip through time, I would think. I mean, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but I would think you would probably have the capability to do that if you could travel these great distances.
Oh, yeah. Like you also have to realize that time is directly correlated to the mass and weight of whatever planet you're on, and then the speed at which things move, and all those take into account. I know personally well, not personally, but from enough of my own research, that when you start to get into things that create like anti-gravity, like effects, you are fucking with time in a way. Things that affect things differently, especially when you also start blasting it with heavy amounts of electricity.
Yeah. And, you know, love or hate Bob Lazar, that's one thing that he has said, is that he's concerned if anybody ever kind of, i.e., cracks the code, that kind of power, that kind of energy could be used in a way that could cause a lot of problems and do a lot of damage. And I love what Gray Owl is saying here, right? Because we've had reports of these things for as far back as we were able to document things, and probably farther back then, right? Like as soon as we could start putting pen to paper, we're talking about God and fairies and angels and demons and all of these things, right? And I like the perspective there. The answer is yes. It's all of it, right? It could be, it quite possibly could be whatever we're projecting into it. It's just so fascinating. But that's why we're here, right? Because it's a fascinating subject. So, okay, so here's Dolan some more on this hypothesis here. We'll try to wrap it up. I'm hoping he gets to the point here and he gives us kind of a one line. This is the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
We're looking at the early UFO phenomena or ancient aliens phenomenon, wondering, you know, have they been here all along? So you have all of these competing theories that somehow come in, and then the whole interdimensional hypothesis. Are these beings from another dimension of reality in one way or another? And time travel theories, and aside from the skeptics, you know, who just said it's all a big mistake, or the psychosocial explanation that just said it's all in your mind and somehow this reality is interacting with our mind. Time travel, and some of the more, you know, interesting hypotheses. Well, let's not forget the whole black budget, you know, the secret technology hypothesis, you know, everything following from the Nazi UFO program, if there really was one, you know, following into today.
Oh boy. Now that's one I know has piqued your interest, right? Is that Nazi UFO advanced tech?
Oh yeah,
research?
I wouldn't even go farther than flying saucers, being one of the main components of secret tech over there.
Wow. So you think they had developed some type of a flying saucer craft?
Yeah, just I guess counter-rotating ducted fans. You know what I mean? They're similar to what we use with hovercraft. Just because I've seen enough of the technology already used in bits and pieces within our own stuff. And when we covered Rene Cousinet and we covered some of the other flying saucer stuff, like I love this because that's what I saw in the 90s was a flying saucer. And I thought it was antique back then. I had already heard about TR-3Bs and triangles and things like that. So when I saw that, I was like, this is an antique, but it still blew my fucking mind that it was silent, you know? But I mean, the earliest adaptation of that was ducted fans and thrust vectoring and stuff like that. I mean, we had the Avro car in the US, which not very good.
Yeah,
in its first iteration. Yeah.
Not very successful. Yeah. We looked at that one a little bit a while ago. So do you mean like Kazarev type stuff? With the mirrors and the reflections and all that kind of stuff? Are you talking
well, that's a bit different, only because then like that's a little bit later, because we get John Searle, which he did some stuff that was similar to the Rene Cousinet one, where that was more electrical effects, especially when you start using, like, now we'll use femtosecond pulse lasers to create different effects. Back then it was a little different.
Rene Cousinet is one that we discussed on this show. He actually developed a freaking UFO.
That one right there is the one that he never got to build. That one was his pièce de résistance. You know, that one looks like it came from a fucking 1940s sci-fi film.
Yeah, it looks like War of the Worlds. I mean, it's crazy. But then when you get into the actual what he was doing with the science and the developments he was making there. He was actually making some strides. And then wasn't this another mysterious scientist goes missing or dead issue? But
Yeah,
years and years ago?
he unalived himself, and then he unalived his wife.
Right.
Right before his patent got accepted by the military in France. And the weirdest part about that is anyone who puts in a patent, especially for a military proposal, it's not given to you the next day. It takes a little while. This was done within a year of his death, and he only filed the patent a year before his death. So within 2 years, it was already adapted. I don't know if they brought it into any projects that they had, but they took on the patent. Oh, and plus the part that you don't want to ignore with this guy is by the time he was like 25, he had already revolutionized airplanes of the time. Right, he came up with the slick airfoil design where there's no sharp edges and things, so that you get more aerodynamics out of it. And he was already working on a saucer type craft by that point. Like, had already had it in his head, was already coming up with plans, and that was already built. So for me, the weirdest part is like he's already looked at as a revolutionary. All the books from before 1930 all talk about him in such a grand way. Then he kind of disappears for a little bit because he does do military work. He I believe was I'm not going to say what he was in the military because I don't exactly remember. But he was in the military. He finished his career with honors, and then continued to work on aircraft after that, to where he wouldn't have been embarrassed. Not in my opinion, anyway. That's like I don't know how many people have come up with revolutionary things, and then maybe 15 years later they're depressed. This guy had a depression that set on so quickly. I'm not sure I've seen that, especially with all the success he's had.
Yeah, that's what Amy Eskridge said, right? Is that there's so many depressed scientists at NASA because they come up with these patents that work the very first time, and NASA still shelves it and doesn't approve it. Makes you wonder, right? And again, cutting edge scientists talking about using anti-gravity type ish technology, mysteriously gone. And that was what year? 60.
Yeah, 64, 65.
64. Okay, 64, 65. And take a look at this list in front of you. So anywho, this isn't going to be a space about that, but it's something to take note of.
And I love that we're covering the overlaps because there are a fucking ton of them.
Dude, so many. Which is, it almost makes you wonder why they would release this stuff, because it almost gives us an insight into their SOP, right? Their standard operating procedure when handling this stuff. So I think that's very interesting. And again, I think that's also a reason why it's a step forward in the right direction.
I agree with you. I agree.
Yeah, but we're going to get to this information here with Carol Rosen. And it kind of starts with this letter. Hi, Dan. John Cipher and I look forward to seeing you on Friday, so on and so forth. John, you probably recall, as an actor who starred on Hill Street Blues and Major Dan, among many other TV shows. Broadway, wish you could hear him sing. The Impossible Dream, which he sang on Broadway, and La Mancha, and movies. He's also a scholar and sings opera in 4 languages and speaks eloquently about space. We've been married for 15 years.
Wow. I would honestly love to have a dinner with that guy. Like just have a glass of scotch in a conversation,
Right. She says, since I closed down the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space a few years ago, which I founded in '83, we've been searching for our role in promoting the space program. As you know, I was spokeswoman for von Braun during the last years of his life. He had me commit to finding the path to open the doors to space. With his full unlimited vision, I think I found a way to do it. We're bringing you a package that will give you the idea Don't worry, it won't cost you or NASA a dime, and will only take as much time as you want, even just a few short minutes. I know how busy you are, so on and so forth. And that was Carol Rosin to Dan. I can't find his last name.
He's like Cher. He's only got a first name.
Like Prince or something. Okay, and then it's kind of interesting because we get like kind of these handwritten letters and whatnot. So let me do this before we jump in. Let's make sure we have an understanding on what this hypothesis is.
And then something as out there as the simulation hypothesis, which is a fascinating theory, which basically posits that our whole reality is in fact an artificially constructed matrix, and not just our environment, but we ourselves. And this is actually a theory of reality taken seriously by a number of very interesting thinkers. So with all of these different hypotheses competing to help explain what UFOs are, you go back to the extraterrestrial hypothesis and you think, oh, that seems a little bit pedestrian. It almost seems boring. And so there's this tendency I have found for people often to look at the ETH and think, that's really not, it's very simplistic. And indeed, there have been some very strong arguments against the ETH. You have astronomers saying things like, well, space travel is just, people don't realize how distant the stars are. For us to get from one star to another, it would take eons and so forth. All of these are true relating to our current technology. I just think, well, I think we probably have some capabilities that are being developed and that may have already been developed, frankly, that might obviate that or get around those limitations.
Damn.
But when I look at the ETH, I ask myself, what support is there? And what I find is I think there's a lot of support for it. And after looking at all of that support, I really continue to think that it's probably the single best explanation for this phenomenon, not without its problems. But for example, I keep coming back to what genuine evidence we do have relating to this phenomenon. Let's start with the military evidence. Let's start with released government documents. I never, ever tire of looking at these. And what we know from declassified US military documents is that this phenomenon, A, was real and is real. B, involved what certainly appeared to be mechanical objects of some sort.
Right. I mean, you can't really argue that. You can argue what they were all day long, but we don't have millions of pages and decades of research because it's not real.
Yeah, but I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Where's the Pentagon Bigfoot files? They don't exist because Bigfoot ain't real.
Although it's illegal to hunt Bigfoot in certain states, which I found fucking nuts.
Right. It is. Yeah, the Bigfoot thing's crazy. Right. I won't go there because it's just too crazy. But yeah, like they would not have been putting an emphasis on this for 80 years if there wasn't something to it. What they are, sure, I'll hear arguments all day, whether they were advanced Chinese drones or us from the future or extraterrestrials from Zeta Reticuli. I'll listen to any argument. But if you say it's not real, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. It's very real what's happening in our skies. It's been going on for a long time. Unfortunately, the other side of that is that because it's so tough to get actual factual data, there's a long line of grifters ready to tell you what it is, right?
Yep, a little too long of a list, if you ask me.
Yeah, there's a long line of people that will tell you, what it is, where they come from, why they're here, what they know, and everything else. But you have to wonder when you hear stuff like that. You have to question stuff like that. Because if you don't, it is possible that we could end up in a fake war with fake aliens. Could you imagine
Owl coming in with another banger comment.
Let's see. Our entire reality is but the H2O within a fishbowl that sits atop the receptionist desk at the aliens field. Absolutely. You know what that reminds me of the end of that movie Men in Black, where like it just keeps zooming out and zooming out and zooming out,
Yeah.
and we're in a marble and they're like playing marbles. So funny.
Or when he opens his locker and there's a whole group of little
like
tiny
solar
people
system
in there.
in there.
It's like, Jay, why?
Oh man. Okay, so let me see. We're gonna go to because I have it kind of bulleted what I'd like to cover here. Because again, this is 100 pages, y'all, and we are not going to bore you with a bunch of nonsense. So we have now jumped to page 67. And we're going to jump back again in just a moment. But on page 67, I'm going to pull up on my main file here. I'm just going to, this is essentially the conclusion of the UFO issue, what they believe. The UFO problem cannot be eliminated by near caustic and offhand witticisms. Since the publication of the first report by the Associate, let me zoom in a little bit. Association des Auditeurs of IEHDN 20 years ago, CNES has conducted serious studies in close collaboration with the Gendarmerie Nationale and the Air Force primarily, as well as other state agencies, civil aviation, weather service, and etc. These studies tallied with other research conducted more or less discreetly abroad, mainly in the United States, to demonstrate the almost certain physical reality of completely unknown flying objects with remarkable flight performances and noiselessness apparently operated by intelligent beings. With their maneuvers, these flying objects considerably impress civilian and military pilots who hesitate to speak about them. The fear of appearing ridiculous, alienated, or simply gullible is the principal reason for this reserve. Secret craft, definitely of earthly origin, drones, stealth aircraft, etc., can explain a minority of cases. If we step back and take an objective look over the years, we clearly perceive the limits of this explanation. Thus, we are forced to resort to other hypotheses. Some can neither be confirmed nor invalidated. They are therefore not scientific, and certainly it is very difficult to scientifically study rare, elusive, and random phenomena. When science is based above all on experiments and their reproducibility, however, the example of meteorites shows that this type of phenomena can nevertheless end up being accepted by the scientific community after centuries of doubt and rejection. A single hypothesis sufficiently takes into account the facts and, for the most part, only calls for present-day science. It is the hypothesis of extraterrestrial visitors. Advanced as of 1947 by certain U.S. military personnel, today it is popular worldwide. It is discredited by a certain elite, but is plausible. Scientists, astronomers, physicists, engineers, futurologists, etc., have elaborated on it enough for it to be receivable as a hypothesis by their peers. Different plausible variants concerning the voyage of one or more civilizations from a remote solar system to ours have been developed. A model of magnet hydrodynamic technology, which could be employed to propel the UFOs in the atmosphere, has reached a significant stage of development. Other manifestations of these objects have begun to receive a physical explanation: automobile breakdowns, truncated beams of light, etc. The purpose of these possible visitors remain unknown, but they must be the subject of indispensable speculations and the development of prospective scenarios. The extraterrestrial hypothesis is by far the best scientific hypothesis. It certainly has not been categorically proven, but strong presumptions exist in its favor, and if it is correct, it is loaded with significant consequences. Wow.
Now, just to tie that into modern day, that's what the patents of what's his name, Salvatore Pais. That's
Okay.
what those have to do with.
Now, refresh us. What are the patents of Salvatore Pais?
With triangular craft with anti-gravitic capabilities, but it's a electrogravitics. So it's like the use of magnets and heavy pulsed energy in order to create lift.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Another.
John Searle has a very similar one, where it looks exactly like that diagram that Rene Cousinet has that we had in that that you put into the background of that one thing that I never noticed before. He came up with something in the U.S. very damn similar to that. I'll actually send you that picture in the background because just to even cover that thing would be pretty cool, especially since we're getting to electrogravitics a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's really kind of the first real headline grabber, right? That the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the best scientific hypothesis. Now, I'm sure there are a good number of scientists that will argue that, but it's kind of a stunning statement coming from a report that was assembled by former military officials, engineers, police, aerospace experts, and then we had all these defense contractors and whatnot that were also a part of this report. So it's not just her saying it. It's her saying what all of these people have come to the conclusion of, right? It's not like just some crazy statement one person's making to go viral, because I don't even know if X was out when this came. I don't think the internet was on when this report came out. This was an actual belief held by them at the time that this is the best explanation for what's going on, which is kind of crazy. Let's see, what else do we got here? Some other interesting stuff in this report. Let's see. Oh, Gray Owl emailed us something here, Flak. A link to a vid named together last night, a social anthropological juxtaposition of the alien enigma. Oh, interesting. Yes, I will absolutely take a look at that, buddy. That sounds very cool. Okay, now we're going to jump back. I think it's pages 52 and 53. And y'all, this document is downloaded right on the Department of War website. Let me get the link for you here. Okay. So I put it in the chat. Our audience is always really in tune with this stuff, so you probably don't even need it. But what is very interesting in pages 52 and 53 is that they explicitly reference Roswell, more classification, how they handle top secret classification, and deliberate misinformation. So in these pages, it suggests that U.S. authorities may have intentionally used secrecy and disinformation regarding UFOs. And again, if you've been researching this topic, you've heard the stories about the general going down to the bar and, what was it? Like a picture of a UFO he put up or something, and just trying to like spread the belief that there was some kind of UFOs because they were going to be testing, what was it? The B-117, the stealth bomber. They reference JNAP 146 reporting regime and mention punitive consequences for unauthorized disclosures. So that's huge. Does that mean UFO secrecy officially enforced when you were in the service and even after the service with legal penalties? Like if you were to go and say something like Bob Lazar said, could you be arrested? Now, I think I understand the need for the secrecy because they're developing these new, we are developing these new, sophisticated systems to kill people with. And we don't want that information getting out. I totally understand that part of it. But there's a flip side to that. Could it just be a gaggle so that if you do see anything weird, you better not say shit, son, or you're going to be locked up? What is that, Leavenworth? You're going to be off to Leavenworth.
Yep. A military court-martial, right?
Yeah. And let me tell you something. Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, is a hell of a lot different than a regular court system, right? UCMJ, they control it all. The prosecution and the defense. And they're the judge, jury, executioner. So if they decide they want to lock you up and throw away the key, they can 100% do that. It gets done. So why do you think like some of these whistleblowers, why do you think that doesn't happen to them? Because we know we've had, just off the top of my head, we had Michael Herrera, we had Kyle, what was his last name?
I want to say Seraphin, but I don't think that's it.
There was Higgins. Anyway, there are all these military folks that came out and spoke about it. So it makes you wonder, like, why are they not being messed with? Right? Why is it okay for them to say something? It just seems inconsistent and strange.
Do you think it could be maybe they so if they do it to every single one of them, it becomes too obvious, so they have to let some linger, especially if they can't exactly get it out of what the thing is. Yeah,
that's a good point. Because then you don't want to look like you're overreacting, right? Then the journalists might pick up on that and smell blood in the water. An interesting thing, this is directly from the page here, page 52, section 10.3, repercussions of UFO manifestations on the official and unofficial conduct of states. The repercussions have been varied in scope based on what can be learned of the reactions of states. It is permissible under our hypothesis to classify them as A, states that have no knowledge of extraterrestrial phenomena or believe they are not concerned. B, states that know of extraterrestrial phenomena but have no means to investigate them. C, states that know of extraterrestrial phenomena and have the means to investigate them. Or D, states that have entered into contact with one or more extraterrestrial civilizations and have established relations and or entered into political, scientific, and technical collaboration. Holy fucking shit. That's on an official report.
Yeah, see, I don't know why everyone's poo-pooing all of this, because it at least proves something. It proves that they gave a fruition and they gave a shit about it long before we did, as far as the general public,
Absolutely. What this shows is okay, if the MJ12 documents were phony, that still doesn't mean there wasn't any truth to them. Right?
And now
we
the
know how
people who looked into that,
disinformation stuff works.
the people who looked into that did their due diligence too, though. You know what I mean? They looked up what other memos had been put out by the same like signatures on the sheets, right? So you'd find
Absolutely.
similar font types that had similar mistakes. Like
Yes.
the T would be shifted up slightly, and it would. Oh, sorry, my stupid dryer. What you'd have is a lot of similarities within real reports coming out of these same offices with similar typos, similar weird discrepancies within the fonts and the letter placement on the page, you know. And then you also have the areas where things were signed, and then also little bits on the page where it told you if it was secret, not secret, unclassified, classified, whatever that stuff is, you know. So there was at least enough to where somebody who created that shit worked within those offices.
Right. And, you know, typically if you send something to the FBI, right, you have this document, you go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. FBI, I want to know if this document is legit or not. Right. And typically what they would do is, if they do it, is take a look at the document, give it their seal of approval or a seal of disapproval, and that's that. But the FBI took the MJ12 documents and in big, bold print wrote fake on every single page. Why is that? Why like a that to me
Seems
that's
like
such
the
a red flag.
FBI doth protest too much, in my
Right.
opinion.
It's such a red flag. Because it's saying, it's almost like with malice. You know, this isn't real. This is fake. Pay no attention to this. So automatically I'm going to start paying attention to that. Right? I mean, or is that just what they wanted?
I think chaos
Um,
might have been the goal there. You know, either which way, they're going to get somebody who believes it or doesn't believe it. You know, and
right.
that's better than I guess the
Thinking it's a
other
stealth
option.
fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see Flak Magnet here has found the life and death version of Sorry, where if you roll the wrong number, that thing actually shocks you to death that you have your finger on.
This is a newer one from a newer lab.
Okay.
John Searle, I've got a bunch of info on him already pulled up. But John Searle passed away before that thing was created. I sent you a photograph right before that of him holding his version.
This one here.
Boom. Yep, that's the one. Doesn't that
Yeah.
look exactly like the other thing that Rene Cousinet was holding about, I'd say, 10 years earlier?
Very, very similar. Very similar as we go through it here. Let's see. This guy here.
The little doodad at the top? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and those are ducted. So those are ducts, right? So as a thing is spinning, whatever current and then air can move and flow freely through there. That's how Rene Cousinet's one worked. This,
Right.
I believe, involved a more updated tech with a lot more energy being passed through it.
You know, I know we're kind of jumping around here, folks, but my theory, I mean, it's still kind of developing on the scientist thing, is maybe not all of them, but maybe some of them hold critical knowledge to develop a future tech like this. And maybe they were just taken off the chessboard, so to speak, for their own protection. I don't know, man. It's just, I have a few different theories, and that's just one of them. Like maybe it's our intelligence removing them from, you know, the scene, but still letting them advance the technology because them being out there is just maybe too dangerous. I don't know. But I know it's very, very difficult for me to believe all these missing and dead scientists are a coincidence.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing in coincidence in general, especially when it comes to with military. They don't like coincidence. I would
Right.
doubt they would leave any singular plan up to coincidence alone.
Right. Right. And you look at those organizations they were working with, you know, that's serious stuff. Okay, but back to this. So we have him holding possibly a design for a working
Yeah,
Kuzanet
do you want me to
RC360.
do you want me to explain the, because I've got it right here.
Please do.
All right, so the basic design is stationary concentric rings called plates or stators. Typically 3 in a basic functional unit. Cylindrical rollers, magnets that orbit around each other while also spinning on their own axis. So like I said, multi-spin. Now when you get into high spin rates, you get a lot of wacky things, one of those being the ability that you can balance very easily. It's kind of like a spinning top. So you get that, and then the rings and rollers are constructed from layered laminated composite materials, often combination of magnetic. So it's like they're talking about neodymiums, but you could do that even with resin, right? You can get a dipole put into a puck made of resin or made of epoxy, made of wax, to where one side is polarized and the other side is not. It says these components are precisely proportioned, the ratio of the ring diameter. We don't need to go into all of that. Yeah, okay. The assembly undergoes a specific conditioning process involving synchronized AC/DC magnetization to imprint magnetic patterns or a traveling magnetic wave. In operation, according to descriptions, the rollers are intended to levitate slightly the ring surface due to magnetic forces. No mechanical contact. They rotate on their own axes and orbit the ring at high speeds. Surrounding coils or pickups harvest induced electrical output. So this is like also getting into some of the tech that Tesla was working on. So we know it's been tried by many different people and seems to work. And
Yeah.
so that's how it works. The claimed principles and effects. Searle explanations involve interactions between magnetic fields, electrostatic potentials, and electron motion, magnetic wave or vortex. So that's the layered magnetization creates a traveling magnetic field. Like you can do this now. Like it's they're essentially describing waveguides, right? Which that could effectively be done by just dugouts in an aluminum substrate, right? Anyone could do it. It's like imagine instead of having, like, this is rudimentary old stuff. Rather than a circuit board, if you had divots, right, placed into aluminum or another substrate, you can have that electricity travel down that waveguide. This is more intelligent, but okay. So now you have the electrostatic potential, which is high radial voltages. We described that earlier. All right. So now the observable effects are generation of electrical power. So this means it's a power generator as well, which means it takes in some and then it
Which
builds
is why
up
it gets
more.
dangerous, right?
Yep.
This is where it gets dangerous.
Now this is also where it gets dangerous. Reduction in local air pressure, temperature, and weight loss of objects placed nearby.
Yeah, that's wild.
Weren't we talking about that earlier?
Yeah.
Levitation or anti-gravity effects at high speeds. We talked about that earlier as well. Gyroscopic and inertial phenomena. Searle claimed early prototypes in the 1940s through 60s produced these effects. This is early. Right? And we're talking about tech that people don't even understand now. With some devices reportedly becoming self-running and powering external loads, which is kind of wild. It's like wireless energy transfer. And that's about it. I mean, there's a little
good
bit more,
stuff, though. That's the thing. Like, that's why, Ops and Aliens is a project of mine, because what these videos could be that the Pentagon is capturing, these crazy looking things flying around, they could be a special access project from another group in the military that they don't know about. Right? That was kind of the predominant theory of the Tic Tac, right? Oh, this is actually something that we have. and we just happened to
Yep.
see it out on a mission. Another group of military professionals happened to see it while out on a mission. They weren't really supposed to.
Now we've seen housings like that, which is why I don't understand people can't get it through their head. Like, we know what a fucking blimp is. You know, this is a different style of blimp, because I found these things. Now they're doing all this shit for massive cargo movement, right? So if you, let's say you don't have to go through a war zone, but you do have to take your military, I guess, a bunch of equipment from one place to another. You use this because it uses. There's somewhere I've seen where it's different inert gases, one of those being helium-3 in baffles, to where you pressurize one bit and you depressurize another bit, and you get certain lift capabilities from doing that. And Lockheed Martin's working on this. They've got one called, I think it's like the Dream Cat or something like that, where it works precisely off that, and it's small. Not as big as some of the other ones that are seen. And I think they're trying to work on smaller ones and then scale up with different types of technologies. So I don't know. We see these things, and there's shit that exists that can fit a similar description. So to ignore them or call the Tic Tacs, I don't know, non-existent is wild to me.
Yeah, with the Tic Tac, I think the main debate to be had is what it actually is. Is it something that we or another country developed, or is it extraterrestrial, or is it ultra terrestrial, right? Because that's a word that doesn't get thrown around quite as much as it used to, but it certainly is a theory. I jumped back on this report again. This is the report from Carl Rosen and John Cipher in 2001 when they were pushing towards disclosure. It seems like this happens every few years. All these people that research this stuff get all gassed up and told, "Hey, we're gonna disclose. We're gonna try to let the public know what information we have," and they get all these researchers to put out everything they have. And then nothing ever materializes out of it on the government side, almost as if it's a psyop, almost as if they just want to see what people have. Right.
Yep.
Okay. So the reason I turned to page 35 is because this gets into the actual physical craft. So it gets into radar and visual cases worldwide. So this is actual data. The radar visual cases are those in which a visual sighting is associated with an on-board radar or ground radar detection. So this is not, even though it should be good enough, this is not just the pilot telling us what they see. This is the pilot saying they see something and either their radar or a ground-based radar confirming. So it's noted that the first sightings in Japan and the USSR date back to 1948. How interesting, right? Roswell 47. The first sightings in Japan and USSR are 1948.
Kenneth Arnold, I did a post on him earlier today. His was like 2-3 months earlier than that. And he's a pilot that worked for forestry. And
Right.
He volunteered to help find a downed aircraft, like a search and rescue for pilots and stuff like that. And on one of his flying runs, he's seen what looked like these like dish-shaped craft flying across the sky at like 1,000 to 1,200 miles an hour.
Washington, right?
Yeah, at about 10,000 feet elevation. And this is somebody who's trained and knew what to look for in the sky to keep himself out of danger. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
If you're a pilot, you want to know what these things are so you don't approach shit you shouldn't. You know, like you just want to make sure you don't kill you and whatever crew is with you in the plane. So
Yeah.
I take his thing with a bit of credibility, because he also didn't say he knew what it was. He said, I seen something anomalous. This is what it was. And then about 4 or 5 newspapers actually ran with his story, and they changed it to the whole flying saucer thing. That was the first mention before Roswell. But everyone thinks Roswell was the first time that we've ever had anything like that. But there have been sightings before that. And that was like the first well-known one.
Yeah, and there's the legend of the UFO that was recovered from Italy in the late 30s, right? From
Yep.
Mussolini. So yeah, there's definitely stories before Roswell. I think Roswell just gets that big attention because they actually said they caught a UFO, and then the next day they had to retract the statement. Not great PR work by the military there.
Yeah, and real weird that they chose to do it in the way they did because I don't know, enough reports have gone out to where like even Roswell just disappeared for a while and then it got back
Yeah.
into the mainstream. You know, not a
Well,
lot of other things did that.
Yeah, it wasn't until 20 years later people even started talking about it. You know, you didn't hear about I mean, there was the initial incident, and then they said, oh, it was just a balloon. And then people just, that was it. And then like 20 years later, these UFO researchers start banging the Roswell drum. So for like 20 some odd years, it wasn't even part of the zeitgeist really. So super strange. But yeah, so the first sightings in Japan, USSR date back to 48. 30 of the 68 countries cited in the list reported radar visual cases. So almost half. Of the 489 cases in the report, 101 were radar visual cases, 21%. Of the 363 cases in the Blue Book report, 76 were radar or visual cases, again, 21%. And 16 out of 68 cases were radar visual cases. That was 23.5%. So they say we can clearly establish that from 42 to 1995, at least 500 well-documented and recognized aeronautical UAP sightings were identified throughout the world, nearly 20% of which were confirmed by radar visual. So this is proof, they believe, of a physical reality of phenomena that exhibited paradoxical maneuvers. And it's like in 2001, they're saying this is real. And it seems like we have to keep doing that over and over and over again, like convincing people this is real. They're not crazy. I mean, when is that stigma going to go away? The government just released all these files. Do you think that's going to help?
I don't know. They've also shot themselves enough in the foot with losing all their credibility that they have.
How do you mean?
Just with all the bullshit they pull with calling everything a psyop and then coming out 10 years later, you know, like just we could just touch on chemtrails or if you want to be super pedantic about it, just weather modification. We saw it in Vietnam. The papers came out that it existed in Vietnam. And then when people were talking about it being done in the United States up in the sky, everyone called them crazy conspiracy theorists. And then Florida decides they're going to ban it. And then all of a sudden, these little things start trickling out. And then we had Augustus DeRucco, or I think that was his name, where he does that via drone for private companies. You can hire him, and he'll make sure that it rains in your area with his little drone that he's got there. So I think that they've done much of a disservice for their own good. Like, let's say they had just been truthful 90% of the time, and then the few times they would have pulled the psyop, it would have been believable by 90% of the public, right?
Right. Instead of just immediately discrediting
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Okay. So this is what I'm about to read you here. This is on page 35/36 of the same report. And again, I think this is important. Air Material Command drafted a report on flying discs, the conclusions of which are very explicit. 1, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. 2, disc-shaped objects, the size of which is comparable to that of our aircraft, do exist. 3, it is possible that some sightings correspond to natural phenomena. 4, the very high rate of climb observed, the maneuverability, and the escape maneuvers when the discs are detected lead one to assume that they are piloted or operated by remote control. 5, Most witnesses describe objects with a metal surface that are circular or elliptical in shape, the upper portion of which is dome-shaped, flying without making any noise in a formation of 3 to 9 objects. And that silent thing, man, that was one thing that really struck you with your sighting, right? It was silent.
It's silent and stood there. Like a helicopter can stay stationary, you know, to a degree. You might have like a little bit of wind interaction. But this thing was like dead still and dead quiet. I didn't even hear like an electrical hum or anything.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And that was the incident I had when I was younger. It was the same thing. Triangle craft. It was not super high off the ground, but no sound, you know, and it was able to completely stop like a hover, like a helicopter would. Turn left, 90 degrees, take off. No noise, nothing. Super strange. Gray Owl's got to bounce. Gray Owl, thanks for hanging out, buddy. You can catch the rest at your leisure. Glad you were here. Hey, Ron's in the house. And we still gotta do a deep dive on this one for Ron Flak, the dielectric vortex. Super,
Ooh, that's
super
new for me.
interesting.
I like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I started
Oh, yeah.
going down the rabbit hole a little bit, and I'm just not smart enough. But we will, we will do something on it. No,
I'll put on my old thinking cap and give it a go.
yeah, gonna need some assistance. Well, I tried to
And
get
if we
Nathan
can't
to help
figure it
with
out,
that one, but that
yeah.
guy's so busy.
I was gonna say, if we can't figure it out, we'll take it to the fucking community. Somebody will know something.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so pages 35, 36, the report summarizes characteristics: disc-shaped craft, no known propulsion, extreme climb rates, silent movement, impossible maneuverability. I mean, we could see that just from some of the videos that we started the space with from the Department of War. Formation flying, and that one is really shocking to me to hear these pilots describe seeing them fly in a formation. That's pretty incredible, because that suggests, again, some kind of intelligence. Okay. So in this document, we're going to jump back. If y'all have it open, I believe it's page 20. I'm sorry, pages 19 and 20. And this may be something you're not super familiar with, but there was what they believe a very highly credible incident in 1976 in Tehran, of all places. Get it pulled up here. Okay. Tehran, September 18 to 19th, 1976. So Tehran is in Iran. This incident took place during the night of September 18th to 19th. Different newspapers worldwide reported it more or less accurately. For example, Francois in the September 21st issue, an American citizen took laborious steps with the U.S. authorities to obtain a report invoking the Freedom of Information Act. He finally obtained it from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Other U.S. documents have been obtained since then. Interviews with generals and the Iranian air traffic controller involved in this affair enabled the DIA report to be confirmed and supplemented a bit, namely with the mention of proper names. The following summary resulted from a reading of the information. At around 11 p.m. on September 18th, the Tehran Airport Control Tower received several calls reporting a strange, immobile, luminous object in the sky above the Shimiran residential district in the northern part of the capital. The person in charge of the night shift, Hussein Parouzi, went out to look at the object with binoculars. He testified he saw a rectangle, probably corresponding to a cylindrical object, the ends of which pulsed bluish white lights. In the middle of the object, a small red light described as a circle. Peruzzi reported this strange sighting to the Imperial Air Force Command, which alerted General Yousefi. the third in command of this Air Force. He went out on his balcony and saw an object similar to a star, but much bigger and brighter. He ordered a Phantom F-4 reaction aircraft, the mission of which he directed through Peruzzi as intermediary. When the F-4 came to within 45 kilometers from the object, its flight instruments and all its means of communication, radio and intercom, suddenly stopped working. The pilot aborted the interception and headed for his base. The crew then regained use of their instruments and means of communication. A second F-4 was sent by General Yousefi. The UFO's echo on its screen was similar to that of a Boeing 707. The F-4 approached the UFO at a relative speed of 280 kilometers an hour. When it came within 45 kilometers of it, the UFO accelerated and maintained a constant distance of 45 kilometers from the F-4. The crew was not able to determine the size of the object because it shone so intensely. Its brightness came from lights arranged in a rectangle, changing rapidly from blue to green to red and to orange. Suddenly, a bright object with an apparent diameter 1/2 or 1/3 of that of the moon exited the UFO and headed rapidly for the F-4. The pilot tried to shoot a Sidewinder missile at the object, but at the same instant, his fire control console on his means of communication became inoperable. He promptly initiated a bank and a dive, but the object changed direction and pursued the aircraft at a distance of approximately 6 kilometers. Finally, the object moved inside the F-4's bank and departed in order to re-enter the UFO from which it had exited. A short time afterwards, an object again exited the UFO and rapidly headed straight down to the ground. The F-4 crew waited to see it explode, but the object seemed to touch down gently and shine a very bright light over an area 2 to 3 kilometers in diameter. The crew, momentarily blinded, orbited long enough to recover their night vision.
Gabe, I'm having I got to dip out for a little bit. I shall be back in like maybe 20 minutes.
Sounds good, buddy. All right, I'm going to go on with this. Okay, so... Should be pointed out that a civilian aircraft also lost communications when it crossed that zone. The next day, the crew was taken by helicopter to the place where the object had apparently landed, a dried up lake, but it didn't find any trace of the object. An attached note from the DIA was just as astonishing as the report itself. It indicated the information had been confirmed by other sources and ended with this assessment, quote, an outstanding report. This case is a classic which meets all the criteria necessary for a valid study of the UFO phenomena. A, the object was seen by multiple witnesses from different locations. B, the credibility of many of the witnesses was high in Air Force general, qualified air crews, and experienced radar operators. C, visual sightings were confirmed by radar. D, similar electromagnetic effects, EME, were reported by 3 separate aircraft. E, there were physiological effects on some crew members, like loss of night vision due to the brightness of the object. And F, an inordinate amount of maneuverability was displayed by the UFOs. The attempt by class to trivialize this case shows how solid it is. And then it goes on to talk about another incident in Russia on March 21st, 1990, where it was reported in an article that Aviation General Igor Maltsov, Air Defense Forces commander, was in a report entitled UFO on Air Defense Radars. And the article mentions the dispatch of combat aircraft on a mission to intercept the UFOs that were detected. I mean, that's some pretty crazy shit, right? Like, we know that based on reports that Russia at one point had the order to shoot down a UFO if they saw one. But then the aircraft that would shoot at these UFOs would crash. They would lose control of them and they would crash. And so they changed that order from shooting them down to observing them. And now that's what we know as of the 90s. How they handle those things now, probably the CIA knows, but we don't know how they handle them now. But Russia does operate a little bit differently, right? Whereas, think of it like the nuclear program. They have to get a check-in saying we're not at war, so the missiles don't go off. Whereas we wait for orders to shoot the missiles off. So it's kind of this total different way of approaching things. I see Ron making some comments about the dielectric vortex, that it's a lost science, and watch Get the Disc YouTube shorts. I definitely will. I watched a short on it, and the gentleman was talking about, I think it was plasma, something to do with plasma. So it was really, really interesting. But again, I have to be careful because that is not my field of study, and I can definitely get in over my head. So hopefully we can get Nathaniel Hanks. Nathaniel Hanks, he's a great friend of the show. Super smart dude. Hopefully we can get him back sometime to talk about that. Okay, continuing on with this report. So we had Iranian military jets scrambled. The pilots lost the use of their instrumentation when they got within 45 kilometers of this thing. Weapon systems were disrupted. The pilot wanted to fire at the UFO and could not fire his Sidewinder missile. And then a secondary object left the primary aircraft and pursued him. Then it goes back up into the UFO. Then a secondary object leaves the UFO again, heads straight for the ground, but instead of a big boom like the witnesses were expecting, they see a bright light upon contact of about 2 to 3 kilometers in diameter. I mean, that is something else. Okay, we had an Air France flight is included in this paperwork too. Let me find that. So this Air France flight, I think it's, page 15. This is another one that's pretty interesting. And again, this stuff has been out there to find, right? For those that research the subject, it has been out there. But what makes it fascinating is that our Department of War has held on to this, which means there's something to it. I can't say exactly what, because I don't know. And as I've said many times, anybody that's telling you they know, I would wonder about that. But there's something there. They can't deny it anymore after this release, right? They can't make fun of it. Have a guy come out in a press conference just like an alien to kind of discredit the whole thing, make a big stupid joke out of it. Now there's in this Air France report, I won't go through and read everything like I did on the previous one. I'll just give you the bullet points here. So there was a commercial airline crew as observers, and what they reported was a disc-shaped craft. Everyone that signed the report actually had a visual confirmation of the craft. They had radar corroboration on the airline as well as on the ground. And then the object just disappeared. Just poof, gone. So it's not just reports of it happening with these military craft. We know we have reports of civilian craft as well. And, I think what's being done here by Carol Rosin is she's establishing, you can't say it's just a military thing. You can't say it's just, untrained people flying around in the sky that are seeing these things. We are getting reports from military to the civilian sector and all in between of these things. It's not pretend. It's not crazy people. This is a real phenomenon that's happening. All right, so let's jump to intelligence, because there are some notes about the craft being intelligently controlled. Let me jump to that section. Again, if you have downloaded this from the website, this starts on page 43 and continues on page 44. All right. And we're going to start off with a good note here. Disinformation attempts. Into this category fall special effects and montages, which are generally accompanied by a lot of media publicity. Some researchers believe that without necessarily lending themselves to the manufacture of ultramodern weapons, the performances of high-tech craft might serve to brainwash public opinion in the same way as other propaganda techniques. Of course, this point of view is a direct result of the Cold War period. Any means were good at the time for destabilizing the other camp, including fear of an invasion by extraterrestrials or the instilling doubt about leaders who hide something manifestly very serious from us, right? And that gets into if you can't trust your government, that could seriously cause some problems. If you have a mass population that has zero trust for the government, which is what we're almost at, that could cause some serious problems for the country and some serious morale boosters for some other countries seeing us deteriorate. So it's good for Russia. It's good for China. It's good for North Korea that we as civilians don't trust our government. That's a benefit to them. And they can use that wedge and drive division in there. We've seen it. We've seen it. So we do have to be aware of that. That some of these stories could simply be propaganda because the other side doesn't want you to trust the government. Okay, it carries on. Holographic images. At the junction between disinformation attempts and extraterrestrial hypothesis lies the technique of holographic images. Whether they be the work of a superpower or extraterrestrial crews. In actual fact, this technique is difficult to employ. It requires considerable preparation because air is very transparent and diffuses light only very poorly. Therefore, it is necessary because air is very transparent. Therefore, it is necessary to have large equipment covering the optical field used, or at least the project an appropriate screen on it. For example, a film of water. So they go on about that a little bit. And that reminds me, it kind of makes me think of what Tim Dillon was saying the other day, right? Like if they do this fake alien invasion thing, I could imagine it just being a shit show, right? Just looking terrible, completely obvious that it's fake, because it's not going to be easy to create holographic UFOs and a holographic space invasion, right? So it's probably going to look wonky and shit if they tried to do it right now. Things to note. And these are things we hear in researching this stuff. So that's why I'm calling them out. Unknown natural phenomena. This hypothesis cannot be ruled out completely and must be therefore cited. However, it is difficult to support in cases where the UFO cited behaves in an apparently intelligent manner, like approach, pursuit, evasion, and escape maneuvers. Just like we were talking about with that pilot in Russia, right? The extraterrestrial hypothesis A large number of people today are convinced the UFOs are piloted by intelligent beings who have come from a very remote part of the universe and are tasked with watching us and even initiating contact with us. As appealing as they may be, these hypotheses run up against all sorts of huge difficulties. The hypothetical Martians only recently disappeared from the realm of possibility, and apart from Earth, the solar system appears to be totally unable to have produced organized life and even more unable to have produced an advanced civilization. It is therefore necessary to look farther to the stars. But the closest star is already 100 million times further away than the moon. The only contacts that we may try to establish from such distances at present are radio contacts. Astronomers have attempted contacts via message transmission and radio listening to the SETI and Mega SETI programs, although some enthusiasts have suggested futuristic ideas to bypass the vast expanse, such as, for example, the use of black holes. The crossing of interstellar distances by possible extraterrestrials has elicited much skepticism, and the majority of astronomers reiterate that to date, there has been no UFO case that is sufficiently well established to imply that it came from an extraterrestrial civilization. Two professional astronomers, Jean-Claude Reeves and Guy Monet, have, however, proposed a scenario in our future in space that includes plausible interstellar voyages. In this scenario, which is summarized in Appendix 4, they envision the establishment of large communities and verdant islands in space, enormous artificial structures orbiting the Earth as described by the physicist O'Neill, and even inside large asteroids, where an abundance of different materials, including water and oxygen, as well as ready protection against meteorites and cosmic radiation, are found. Later on, when our descendants have mastered the production, storage, and use of antimatter as energy, they will utilize it to propel some of their habitats to another solar system. They will settle in an asteroid belt, start families there, and then visit the planets of the receiving system aboard craft that are perceived by any possible natives the same way we perceive UFOs today. Very, very interesting. This scenario, which in essence relies only on laws of physics that are currently well accepted, gives the extraterrestrial hypothesis a certain degree of plausibility. It is possible to imagine that a civilization that came from somewhere else colonized the region of our asteroid belt and used it as a staging base to our planet. Current progress in the conquest of space and physics reinforces this idea. We should point out that some people envisage another hypothesis, which is very controversial. The UFOs do belong to a civilization located in the asteroid belt, but this civilization itself comes from our planet, older than any known terrestrial civilizations and highly advanced. It supposedly disappeared from the Earth, nuclear war, radioactivity, pollution, etc., but resettled in the solar system. Both hypotheses have, to their credit, the fact that they place the UFO problem outside the realm of the paranormal and promote thought about the future of the planet. So that's a very interesting theory, right? We're talking, instead of having to master, oh, my phone just thought I said the name. Instead of having to master wormholes and warp drives and all the other things that we just don't have yet, that we know that could be possible one day, but we just don't have the technology yet. It's all theory at this point. So what if instead of using all that, we develop systems we know work, right? We know how to provide life systems in space. We can send astronauts up. They have oxygen. They have food. They have exercise if they need it. Yeah, they have exercise. They have all these things, right? Entertainment, so I don't go crazy. Friends, all the things that you would need to survive in space. We can provide that. So maybe traveling 100 light years away or something. Yeah, maybe that's not possible. But what if we could hitch a ride on a meteor headed that way, and we could establish living quarters, and we could establish a living, breathable area where we could survive, and literally generations will live on this rock. And when you get to the destination, hopefully, I would imagine, you'd have some way to deploy off of the rock and onto the planet that could support life. And when you think about it that way, like, it's not so crazy to think maybe that's what we're seeing. I've heard a lot of people say drones, like maybe what we're seeing are drones from another civilization that are, scouting and looking. Sure. Maybe they're drones from people that are living on a nearby asteroid. Well, it's all relative. When I say nearby, could be, 10 light years away or something. But it's very possible. And that's something that we could literally do with the technology we have right now. Pretty interesting. Okay, another one I wanted to touch on this was effects on people. It does get into, and I know we have friend of the show, Eric Mitchell, who's come on here, and he's had some, some wild effects from his interaction, from his experience. And I think it's important, like, we have to acknowledge that there are experiencers that have had harmful interactions with these things. They have caused pain, cancer, microwave burns, all kinds of really terrible shit. So let me go back to the page here. Here we go. All right. So actually it's going to be page 40. And we're going to start at 8.1.3, locomotive paralysis of some witnesses. This phenomenon is less common. It is remarkable in that the paralysis reported only affects certain voluntary movements, but not respiration or posture. Balance in particular is not compromised. The witnesses do not fall down, or eye movements. Well, Eric fell down. From the standpoint of concepts, it can be remarked that in human beings, posture and respiration are controlled by the cerebellum, an organ that is independent of the cerebrum, which governs voluntary movements. The paralysis effect observed can reasonably be attributed to microwave acting from a distance on certain parts of the human body. This is also one of the objectives of the work mentioned above on microwave weapons. We should note that these effects, among others, are being studied at the Air Force Weapons Laboratory at Kirkland Air Force Base. And I think it's interesting, people mention that they're going to be looking into these injuries and what they could mean. This report was from 2001. And I will have to see if Kirkland actually issued any findings or research on that. I doubt they did, because every time somebody says they're going to look into this, we never see the resulting work. I mean, why would that be? We think this might be causing harm or injury to people. So guess what? You're not going to see that report. Now, the microwave stuff, that gets into other propulsion methods. I think that's back just a couple pages. In a vacuum, the absence or scarcity of molecules or atoms prevents current flow in the medium, as well as the projection of a mass sufficient substance pulled from this medium. MHD propulsion is therefore not possible. and it is necessary to formulate other hypotheses. Jet propulsion by means of chemical reactions comparable to our rocket engines, even though its performance is more advanced, should not be ruled out a priori. In fact, the space phase of the travel of unknown objects takes place very far from sight. In addition, skins for stealth purposes render them invisible to telescopes and radars beyond a few kilometers or a few dozen kilometers. Consequently, at these distances, these objects could very well use classic propulsion systems without being detected. Mainly, then, problems with respect to power consumption and mass to be expelled are raised, but the method reviewed below would enable these problems to be partially solved. And then it gets into more advanced technological propulsion systems. And this is when we get into injuries, right? We know we have folks working on this type of stuff, working on this advanced propulsion stuff. And some of the side effects of some of the stuff they're using could be causing harm to them, could be causing harm to those around them. It's kind of like playing with fire. You know, like when you think about it, when we were doing the nuclear testing, people were concerned setting off a nuke would light the atmosphere on fire. And we still did it. We still did it. They're like, oh, if you set that off, you might accidentally light all the oxygen in the atmosphere on fire and, you know, just kill every living thing. Oh, yeah? Like, how likely is that? 12%? We'll risk it. It's worth it. We're a wild species, y'all. We are a wild species. So we've got microwave effects, paralysis of witnesses, immobilization, right? Like, people can't move. And if you missed my interview with Eric, please go check it out and listen to him describe. He's basically describing this. And he's not alone. There's many experiencers that have had interactions with things that have caused harm to them. So the French defense study in this paper does discuss witness paralysis. And I just wanted to make sure we see that in 2001, we were discussing this and literally have made no progress. Well, if we have made progress, it's not being shared with the people. Another interesting thing in this paper is this section I just turned to here. It says page 50, I believe. Let me just make sure. And this gets into, okay, let's say UFOs are real. And I think Travis Taylor wrote a paper several years ago about defending the world if we were like attacked by UFOs or something. Here's another paper. This is an 01. And this is the same paper. They get into it a little bit. It says, to date, a UFO has not been the certain cause of any accident or a fortiori any hostile act, at least officially. No UFO threat has materialized in France, although intimidation maneuvers have been confirmed. And that is what we were talking about earlier, that Russian pilot looking to see what's going on with this UFO. And it literally like deploys a little drone to intimidate and cause the F-4 to maneuver away from the object. I mean, that's not just some random act, right? That's something demonstrating intelligence. However, numerous manifestations observed by reliable witnesses could be the work of craft of extraterrestrial origin. Indeed, if it were a question of terrestrial craft, these could only be American, and despite all precautions taken to maintain secrecy, this would be known. And that's true, right? Like they were able to keep the F-117 secret for a while, keep it out of the mainstream. But the people living around that area knew something was going on because they were hearing noises, they were seeing these triangle craft, right? And so as much secrecy as we would try to put on it, it would be difficult for us to completely not have anything about an advanced craft that we have get out, right? Like Boeing will show the world these advanced craft before we even purchase them and stuff. So it's very difficult, especially in today's day and age. Let's see, what did I leave off here? So the first prototype stealth aircraft flew at the end of 1977. The existence of stealth aircraft became known about 10 years later in 1988, but credible confirmed UFO sightings began in 1944. It goes on about, is it real? Is it people's imagination? So on and so forth. But here's a strategic planning. The definition of a strategy toward an adversary requires that one know the adversary, right? So that would be challenging in this situation. So you want to know the adversary, you want to understand their intentions and ascertain their mode of action. But in the case in question, we can only advance hypotheses formulated on the basis of the facts observed and their interpretation while trying to answer three questions. Who are they? What are their intentions? Are they seeking to make contact, or have they already done so? What do y'all think in the chat? You think that they have already made contact? They're seeking to make contact? Who are the extraterrestrials and what are they like? A relative consistency emerges from the numerous descriptions of the phenomena: saucer, luminous sphere or cylinder, hovering followed by accelerations at lightning speed, the absence of noise, easily supersonic speed with no sonic boom, associated electromagnetic effects that interfere with the operation of nearby radio or electrical apparatus. These extraterrestrials are highly endowed intellectually and are technologically advanced over us to have been able to achieve what we do not yet know how to do. But the rest remains a mystery. Morphology, physical makeup, type of life, manner of communication, form of society, sense of values, concept of time, motivations, etc. If they are observing us, it is necessary to note an apparent contradiction between the interests that they show in us and their furtiveness. Rather than observe us, it seems that they want to show themselves to us and to gradually acclimate us to the idea of their existence. That's definitely, that makes a lot of sense to me, because that certainly seems like what's happening these days, right? We are being made aware of some other NHI. So I won't read you all this verbatim, but I'll tell you what I got out of it. Essentially, these are the bullet points that I noted. So there are strategic implications. There's absolutely a possibility that they are hostile, and just haven't acted that we know of yet in a hostile way. There's been multiple contact scenarios. And because of that, we have response planning, like our military has response planning. What we would hope for would be peaceful contact, right? And that's what the planning kind of gets into, is how we would establish a peaceful contact between ourselves and this NHI, or I don't even know how you pluralize NHI. NHIs? I don't know. if there are any localized hostile actions, we would 100% have to investigate that and know, the 5 W's, essentially: what, when, where, how, why, all that good stuff. There would be global implications, right? Like, remember Reagan saying, well, if we all had a common enemy or whatever, then, maybe we would all see eye to eye and we'd get along and sing kumbaya and yada, 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 because we'd have to fight the aliens. That sounds like propaganda to me. But when you think about this file here, if you've downloaded it and you're looking at it, they literally wargamed extraterrestrial contact, which is not something you really do to a topic you think is bullshit. Let's put it that way. And right near these same pages, I think it's back a little bit. 44, basically pages 44 to 48, it gets into Roswell. And what's interesting about Roswell is that they treat it seriously. They don't mock it. So they talk about Colonel Corso, the level of military secrecy at that time, and how it got hyped up even more due to the Cold War. And then it gets into crash retrievals. Now, folks, this paper was turned in 2001. So this is well before Jake Barber and Skywatcher and all of that stuff. Years before any of that. And they're talking about crash retrieval programs. So these files, they come out on the Department of War website, and maybe it's not groundbreaking, world-shattering news to you if you have researched this subject. But the fact that the Department of War has been holding on to these files and released them and still holds on to them means that they have been using them. They have been referencing them. They have been taking this seriously while making you and I sound like conspiracy theorists whack jobs. Many of the witnesses in these documents were pilots, military officers, radar operators, police. We had crew and cabin on a commercial liner, pilots of a commercial liner, trained observers. These aren't like random, unreliable witnesses. And again, this has been going on since the 40s. Another interesting thing I saw in here was on, I noted it here, page 51. Okay, if you go to page 51 of the document, it says literally, quote unquote, intimidation maneuvers against aircraft. This is what the UFOs had done. So we referenced it just for a second earlier about how they're actually intercepting and pulling off aggressive maneuvers. So I guess the thing is, if they wanted to cause harm, they would have done it already 100 times over. And some people, they have caused harm to. You're just not listening to them. And that kind of pisses me off. If there's super intelligent NHI, it's almost like when a parent says, "Oh, you know, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. It's for your own good. Don't worry about it. You don't need to know because I said so." I didn't like that stuff when I was a kid, and I don't like it now. Another interesting piece of this paper, and there's a lot in here, right? Like I hope you're thinking about downloading it and reviewing it because there's a lot of very interesting stuff in here. But page 65 and 66 gets into media manipulation. So they talk about public panic, which is a conversation we've had. There was the report that was done where it says, you know, people would just lose their shit. Religion would go nuts, this and that and the other, where if this were to get out, it would just cause too much panic in the public. And so we've just got to keep a lid on it. Bullshit. That's bullshit. They talk about disinformation, right? Providing reporters with stories they know are bullshit and they know can be discredited. That way the reporter looks more dumb and so does the topic in general. 100% ridicule. The ridicule still happens. Watch a UFO doc. Even the pro UFO documentaries will take little pop shots at the people that are researching this. Still to this day. And then you have media influence, right? There's only, we're like 4 guys own all the media in the entire world. So whatever they say is pretty much the deal. Last couple of interesting bits of this paper. And we talked about it at the top of the show. It mentions John Cipher. It mentions the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space. And Carol Rosin even notes that, quote, they've been searching for our role in promoting the space peace program. Then John Callahan, handwritten note says, you will note the preface by your former counterpart and references the COMETA report. So this is interesting provenance because how did the French report circulate around the FAA, and US insider circles? So this is a French report. So to me, that's one of the more interesting things. The Tehran case, the effects that these UFOs can have, the physical effects on people. Intimidation maneuvers. Now, we should be happy that nobody got hurt. But what does it say that if these are intelligent beings, they're okay with just scaring us away, kind of shooing us away? It's a kind of a big time flex, right? Like, damn. We had Roswell references. They're all throughout this paper. And again, they do not mock it or ridicule it. They're taking it as an actual incident that took place. So this document, it's not an official French government declaration of extraterrestrials, but it is a serious report that was produced by defense-connected experts. All right, so it's not from the government, but it's from all these folks that contract with the government. And they know how these operations go down. And any reference to an actual incident, they have actually backed up with the data. So again, this was the Carol Rosin paperwork. We're going to take us out on this little video. If I can get it loaded up here. This is Jacques Vallée on the extraterrestrial hypothesis, courtesy of Finding UFOs. Make sure and subscribe to their page if you haven't yet. But this is the Jacques Vallée explanation here, and maybe he can explain it a little better than Dolan did. Who knows? Let's see.
There is no more influential thinker in the study of UFOs than the French astronomer, computer scientist, and ufologist, Jacques Vallée, earned a reputation as the grandfather of UFOs. 6 years later, while working as an astronomer at the Paris Observatory, for his discussions with the Invisible College of UFO Scientists, Vallée began to feel that the extra...
Oh, that's annoying. I thought we were going to get a nice little explanation. Let's see if we can find one here. Okay, here's Dolan again, but this is at a conference. It's Ozark Mountain.
Our next presenter has been a researcher of UFOs for 20 years. He believes that they constitute the greatest mystery of all time. I don't think we'd disagree with that, would we? No. He's the author of several volumes of history and speculative book about the future. His latest work is UFOs from the 21st Century Mind, as a fresh treatment of the entire subject of UFOs. In it, he discusses the important sightings, the encounters, the politics, the cover-up, ancient aliens.
Okay, here we go.
For a couple of months. That's really literally what I thought. And then I was 22 years. I'm not really an investigator. I don't really do like a specific case. And I mean, I've done some just because some of them come to me. But what I really like to do is just sit lazy on my couch reading things and think, oh, that's a good idea. Let's write about this. And that's another good idea. And then, well, that's actually not true. I like doing historical research and finding things out that way. But I've never really known how to characterize what I do. I have a curious mind. I like to ask questions. And one question leads to another. And the next thing I know, I'm in this field. And for reasons that I still haven't really figured out, people sometimes want to hear what I have to say. And I think, really? Because, I mean, is that not the most boring subject that I have here? The extraterrestrial hypothesis, exploration of an idea. Last night we had Linda Moulton Howe talking about an alien taxonomy and the detailed situation of these various races. I'm thinking, I don't really add to that. And then we have Whitley Strieber talking utterly genius, brilliant, profound statements about the nature of humanity and the soul and these connections with other beings, the effects of meditation and contact with other entities. I'm like, oh yeah, well, a little bit, I guess I talked about that. And then we have Jim Mars talking about Pat Price remote viewing aliens in Alaska and Africa and Australia. And I think this is way more interesting than anything that I'm going to present to you. I just think I'm glad they're not passing out tomatoes when you come into the door, because I just feel like I don't have that much to present. So here's my remote clicker. I will say, because this is going to be so boring, you just get ready to take a nap if you want. It's cool. But I am working on a non-UFO book right now, and this will annoy the people who want the third volume. So this is a story of my life. So I read the first volume of UFOs and National Security State 16 years ago. And people then said, oh, that's great. Where's the second volume? I'm like,
I do love Richard Dolan, but also I really just want a nice, clean explanation of the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Really great co-author, Bryce Zabel. And then I thought, well, I'll get back to volume 3 of my history. And then that didn't happen. I ended up writing UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which again, I'm glad I wrote that book too. That's an overview of the whole topic. I feel it's the best overview you could read. If you've never read a book on UFOs, I wrote it for that. But I found that experienced students have also appreciated, because there's fresh ideas. I wanted a definitive, sophisticated overview of this whole crazy subject in one volume, and that was my goal. So then I thought, great, now I'm going to get back to volume 3 of UFOs and National Security State, because I got people actually sending me hate mail now because I haven't gotten to it. And I thought, I'm going to do it. But then I thought, oh, no, I have another book that I want to write, which is true, which I'm writing now, which is a history of false flag operations, if you're familiar with false flags. So I'm doing that now. There hasn't been a history of this done. And for those of you who don't know, I'm from New York City. I'm Brooklyn. My dad was a New York City cop. I grew up in a family of cops. And my dad, after he retired, worked at the World Trade Center. He had Tuesdays off when 9/11 happened. I didn't know that fact all day long. I mean, phones are out, if you remember. He shared his job with a very nice man who was killed that day. And that's not what prompted me to study 9/11 and other false flags. It took me about a year of people haranguing me saying, you have to look at 9/11. And eventually I did, and that became a kind of secondary obsession of mine. And what I decided that I wanted to do, though, is to trace the history of that very nasty phenomenon, that of false flags. In other words, when a government...
Okay, well, we're getting everything but the UFO. This is Richard Dolan. Oh, Dr. Dolan, I love you, buddy, but we need the explanation. So I used my resources here. We've got the actual, it's kind of a long explanation, but it's a good explanation. So the logic is basically, if some UFO cases are genuine physical craft exhibiting these crazy behaviors, what technology would be required? So, we've got the acceleration, the instantaneous direction changes, the silent flight, the hovering, so on and so forth. We have the propulsion problem, right? Like a normal aircraft is going to require jet exhaust, propellers, a rotor lift, aerodynamic control surfaces, and so on. But the UFOs don't have any of that, right? There's no exhaust plume, there's no sonic boom, there's no wings, and near instant vector changes. So it would represent a radically different propulsion mechanism than what we know. COMETA, COMETA, discusses magnet hydrodynamic propulsion, or MHD. And you can find, again, pages 37 to 39 on that. But the concept is basically you would ionize the surrounding air. It would create a plasma. You would manipulate charged particles with electromagnetic fields, and that would generate the thrust and the, almost instant speeds and so on. So it would kind of be like a bubble, like an electromagnetic bubble propulsion. You make this bubble around you, and it's going to shoot all around. And I haven't seen, what was the Disclosure movie? Not the one Spielberg's coming out with, but oh crap. The one that Dan Freeman just did. Anyway, I think they discussed that type of propulsion in that documentary. Inertial control, right? Like our fighter pilots, if you've ever seen them, any of those behind the scenes videos of the Blue Angels or any other, air show where these pilots are going really fast and they have to like grunt like a pig to keep themselves from passing out because of the G-force. That is where we are at biologically, going that fast. The UFOs can make a 90-degree turn instantly, and it seems like it doesn't matter what speed. It can be like at hypersonic speeds. And then they can also do abrupt stop. So it can stop like on a dime and then completely change direction. So humans, we just couldn't tolerate that, right? Like our bodies physically, biologically could not go through that. So you take all those, you put them together. That means either A, there's no biological occupants in these craft, or B, there's some kind of inertial mass manipulation. And you may have heard this before, where to us, it looks like they're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? As fast as you can barely see them, just like that. But on their end, they're actually cruising along at what feels like a nice slow speed. So they're not feeling those G's from those sharp turns. Those turns don't seem sharp to them. It just seems like a regular turn. So that would mean, if all that is true, that there's a more exotic engineering concept, right? Instead of pushing against air, the craft manipulates space-time or local inertia. So you could have things like, there's been different theories out there, like gravitational field manipulation, reducing mass, right? Mass reduction, space-time metric distortion, warp-like local bubble effects. If inertia is altered, that means the occupants wouldn't experience crushing G-forces. Acceleration could appear impossible externally. And again, this is speculative physics, but if these are indeed craft, this is kind of what we're looking at. A lot of UFO cases report radar disruption, avionics interference, radio failure, engine shutdowns, and so forth. So basically could indicate very strong electromagnetic fields causing those interruptions. And then we have the directed energy and the paralysis effect. And a lot of people believe that comes down to exposure to microwave. Microwave can cause your tissue to heat, and a whole lot worse. It can cause issues with muscles and muscle control. And it can also cause issues on hardware, like radars and sensory systems and so on. There's not a ton of evidence on that, but we know they're using microwaves for directed energy weapons. We know that they are. For a fact, they let the cat out of the bag. They do it. So you take all of these things together and more, and essentially what you come out with is that the technical argument isn't that there's little green men. It's, if these observations are accurate, the engineering required would be beyond publicly known aerospace physics, or just simply more advanced than we are capable of. Which is why it's believed, according to these papers here, that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the best scientific explanation for UFOs. And it makes some very valid points. So if you're just joining, we're about to end this stream, but please go back and you can watch the first half of this stream with Flak. If you missed anything about the extraterrestrial hypothesis and this paper here. Now, sad to note, but Carol Rosin has passed away, since all this came out, but you can go search Carol Rosin on YouTube, search her just on a search engine, whatever. She has done just a lot of really, really cool, interesting work to try to advance this study. So Carol, thank you so much for your hard work for this section on these UFO files. So the UFO files, the FBI file on Carol Rosin, essentially comes down to the extraterrestrial hypothesis being the best scientific explanation for what these UFOs are. And I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention that Carol Rosin also believed what Stephen Greer believes, as far as a type of cabal or government entity that is going to use a fake alien invasion so that they can run essentially a tyrannical, all-powerful government. And there's nothing we can do about it because we'll be too afraid of the fake aliens. And I wish I could confidently say, there's no way our government would do that. But I can't anymore. I can't. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in for this episode. We will see you on the next UFO Files episode. I haven't chosen which one I'm going to get into yet, but I can promise you it's going to be a good one. Have a great evening, y'all. Thank you so much for watching the Gabriel Speaks podcast. Don't forget, like and subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps the stream and everything. And have a great evening.